What is 3G, 4G, 5G? Many people are asking me this question, and the answer is actually very nice when you talk about G's. And to start with G's, I have to go to 1G. So if you just look at first generation, the G stands for generation. So it's not specifically a standard. It's almost the level of communications at a point. I can't remember when this came out, 70s, 80s. This is actually analog voice phones. So this is where Lady Diane things used to be copied by people. This was pure, uncoded type of voice communication in an analog fashion, but you could talk from cell phone to cell phone. That was called first generation. Second generation is the stuff that, for example, in South Africa we started with. The most common standard was GSM. And GSM was, in other words, digital voice. So that was the main change between the first and the second generation. So this was actually digital, which meant better quality. It also means it could be routed using digital techniques, and it compressed voice into about something like 10 kilobits per second, and much improvement on this. This was a very generic one that was defined in Europe, and in America they had things that was called CDMA amps and so forth. So many terms which define the standards, but that was second generation, digital voice. And then came third generation, which was really data, cellular data. Now, what is to me quite cute is because this voice was done transmitting bits across the air, there was what people used to call 2.5G, because people started using this for data communication, and that was known as GPRS, which was about 50 something kilobits per second, quite slow, but it gave us data, and something called Edge. Similar speed I think Edge was a little bit faster. Now GPRS was just really taking some voice channels, which in any case contain the data, and normally in a voice channel you've got sort of 8 slots for data, and they could combine them and give you a complete channel or complete frequency in the GSM radio. So instead of your 10 kilobits, you can now get 8 times 10, whatever it was. I can't remember the exact numbers, but that was 2.5G, so the first attempt to actually transmit data over. Then they defined proper 3G, and the first standard there was called UMTS, which wasn't actually that much used. It was about 500 kilobits per second, and then came all the HS, DPA, and H+, and so forth. So guys were just pushing up the speeds, but it was essentially using this standard. So the HSPA, sorry, to get it right, people also refer to the HSPA part. HSPA, DPA, that was non-symmetric, and then HSPA and HSPA+, and so forth. This was typically starting at around about, as far as I remember, 2 megabits per second, and the fastest ones of them were hitting something like 40 megabits per second, or theoretical. And then people said, now we want to use newer type of technology, because these ones had problems in the sense that as they go faster, the bits was getting smaller and smaller in space, and when they reflect, they start interfering with each other and so forth. This was this wonderful technology, and I've explained it in another video, where they transmit actually 1,000 bits next to each other, which means you can make them long. They actually go slow, but because 1,000 at a time, it goes very fast. So here the people are starting to talk about 150 megabits per second. So really significant increases from where we started off here, which was really about half a megabit per second. So creeping along here, but this is a complete new standard. You can't retrofit. All of these you could fold back, so not all the way there, but typically if you had a modem, for example, here, it will still do this, it will still do this, and so forth. This is new. You can't mix the two. This can't fall back to any of these other ones, which is why they need new spectrum, and it's a problem, but of course, at the end, all of these will go, and this will do everything. So this, people must never forget, is data and voice. You think of it as a data standard, but ultimately it will do both, because of course both is just data. And so 4G is also other terms used. This actual standard is LTE, stands for long-term evolution. It's release 1, 2, 3, I think we're on 8 at the moment, most probably 9. I haven't looked recently. And a standard called WiMAX, which has been used for some time, is also described as 4G. The characteristics of this is that it uses a fantastic modulation scheme, which is what I referred to, all the bits traveling next to each other. and no longer interfering. And it's called orthogonal frequency division multiplex as a standard of coding it. Fantastic standard, because it allows you to transmit huge amounts, and then as the channel gets noisy and stuff, it can go less, and you can always transmit, but you start wasting a lot of your spectrum. And it uses MIMO, which is multiple antennas, so you can transmit multiple of these streams next to each other, and so increase the amount of data that you can send across. And 5G is still a dream at the moment. So 5G is not actually a defined standard at this stage. These guys would release proper standards that the whole world can follow and make their own. 5G is still a group of people. All of these are decided by groups of very clever people trying to define the next level. And there they're talking 1 gigabit per second plus. And the exciting type of thing, they're talking of what they call massive MIMO. They're talking of having a transmitter sitting somewhere else and the receiver sitting closer, because often we can't get symmetry because we can't transmit hard enough back. So you would have like one receivers everywhere, perhaps transmitters less often, and that way get massive speeds, many more cells very closely located, and fantastic techniques. They're talking of really multiples of antennas. They're also talking of what they call full duplex. In other words, where your phone at the moment can only transmit and then receive because it hasn't got such high level filters. Here you will be able to transmit and receive at the same time. And not defined yet, but this is supposed to then give you the full, what they call triple play. We will be able to do video, voice and so forth. This was high speed data, and this will be the triple play. And most probably faster than most other things except fiber.